Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Black Tub Bootlegs. Today's review, Thundercats from Mexico. We've got a wide variety of figures, some that are old, some that are new, some that are based on original LJN molds, and some that are custom toys. Lots of these are sold online as vintage when they're actually new. Let's go ahead and take some time to figure out what's what. Starting with Panthro, you can see we have a nice metallic bootleg and a smaller white blow-molded figure. When compared to the original LJN toy, you can see there's a lot of disparity in terms of the details and scale. The silver toy is much smaller than the original LJN toy. I'm not sure if this was done intentionally or just the result of whatever materials they were using. The smaller blow-molded figure is obviously a new sculpt. Taking a look at the silver figure, you can see they've added a spike to his shoulder straps for whatever reason. The torso lifts very easily away from the hips, the joints really aren't binding. With a little bit of leverage, the arms just fly right off. The paint jobs for these things are actually pretty rough. This one is a little bit cleaner than most. Seems like some kind of watered down acrylic, and the paint application is just done with a very big brush. The Panthro figure has a gimp foot, which I've actually seen on numerous bootleg Panthros. I'm not sure if it's the same molds or if they keep having trouble molding Panthro. Taking a look at the smaller blow-molded figure, you can see this is actually a new sculpt, not really based on any existing product. I think this may have been used in conjunction with a vehicle, or maybe it was a parachute toy. The plastic is very, very thin. You can see the light just shoots right through it. It's a very small figure. Overall a nice oddity, not something that you see that often. Moving on to Tygra, you can see these two bootlegs are actually based on the exact same mold. I'm not sure if they were manufactured at the same time. The plastics are a little different. Obviously the paint jobs are completely different. The one figure that's been painted nicely is actually very accurate to the original toy. The poorly painted figure looks like Oatmeal Face Mel Gibson. There's a little flaw in the shoulder where the plastic didn't fill the mold all the way. This weird sprue coming off to an accessory that really doesn't make much sense. Both figures are posed in a strange downward position as if they're looking for lost car keys. Overall, a pretty unfortunate bootleg. Moving right along, let's take a look at Cheetara. You can see we have a nice example of her in her original packaging, and also a fairly heavily played with figure. The molds of the face are really accurate to the original LJN toy. The paint jobs are so heavy-handed they really just bury all the detail that exists within the toy. You can see on the back of the figure the Battlematic action's been kind of quickly filled in. This figure ships with a very simple staff accessory. The nice thing about this is the blister at the top. The print quality is actually very good. Again, the finer joints have been replaced with simple peg and hole connections. We have a little bit of a slump in the shoulders, but overall, very accurate to the original toy. Unfortunately, the paint just doesn't want to stay on these things due to its waxy texture. Later on in LJN's existence, they decided to upgrade smaller figures that were released as accessories as larger articulated figures. Originally, Snarf shipped as a small accessory with Lino, but then was later released as a fully articulated figure. So what we have here is a bootleg of those, an accessory and an upgraded figure. Taking a look at the larger Snarf companion figure, you can see he's comprised of a ton of soft vinyl pieces. The joints for these are actually very good. I was trying to figure out how to open his jaw and found that if I remove the mullet on the back of his skull, you can actually open his mouth very wide, very disturbing figure. Tons of kind of uncontrolled surface detail. This is, I believe, to actually be more of a fan creation than a bootleg toy. Taking a look at the smaller Snarf accessory, you can see it looks nothing like the original. I don't even know how to describe him. He just kind of looks melting and unfortunate. Continuing with the companion series, we have Wilykat and Kit. You can see these are copies of the two smaller accessories that would have come with Tygra and Cheetara. One has a larger base on it, the other one they decided not to copy the base. When compared to the original, you can see obviously a loss of scale and just the finer details are kind of missing. And of course the paint job is just much, much sloppier. The larger Wilykat figure is actually a really interesting toy. I feel that it's made by the same person that made the Snarf figure, just the style in which it was made. The head sculpt looks very similar to some of the original artwork, but the body proportions are really kind of wacky and don't really line up with the existing toys. You can see the costume is actually quite accurate. There's a little unfortunate upskirt. The hands have decent detail. The feet are overly simple and look nothing like the original Thundercats. This one actually shipped with a hoverboard, which I don't have. Overall, fairly cool bootleg, but I tend to think it's a modern custom. Taking a look at our villains, let's move on to Mumra. You can see we have some pretty good bootlegs of the original LJN toy, and the smaller decrepit figure on the left is actually a completely new sculpt. Taking a look at the first figure, you can see the coloration is really kind of all over the place. The articulation very, very simplified, just peg and hole connections, which we've seen before. The casting for this is pretty good on the face. The paint job is atrocious. The body casting is not so good. Again, the painting is pretty atrocious. The casting on the feet is pretty good, and the painting is also atrocious. The best part of this figure is actually the accessories. A nice translucent green material. Has a retro glow-in-the-dark feel, even though the toy doesn't glow in the dark. The next Mumm-Ra bootleg is actually fairly accurate to the original toy in terms of the coloration and paint job. You can see the handholds have actually been filled in, so this guy can't even hold accessories. For whatever reason, they've rescribed in the lines on the legs. And of course, where the Battlematic action was, they use that as a location for where the plastic is injected into the mold. The headdress is actually included in the body mold and is unfortunately permanently placed at an angle. You can see the hip connections and arm connections are very similar to the Panthro figure that we looked at earlier. Probably made by the same person. The final version of Mumm-Ra is actually my favorite. It's the decayed version. This is one of the first bootlegs of Mumm-Ra that I ever found. Really looks nothing like the original toy. Definitely inspired by it though. For some reason he has the headdress of the ever-living Mumm-Ra. They snipped off some of the wrapping in the back so that it could actually fit over his tiny shoulders. The articulation is very simple, not very useful unless he's going to do the twist or maybe giggle. Lots of thin little sheets or flash around the fingers. Overall a really ugly bootleg, but not the ugliest one in this series. Moving on, let's take a look at Monkeyan. You can see I have 3 figures here. The middle figure is a very accurate copy of Monkeyan, and then the 2 other figures we have are Rotaro and the Snowman of Hook Mountain that have Monkeyan bodies. You can see the toy in the middle is actually fairly accurate to the original. There's a small hole in his head where his helmet clips on, and then also the Battlematic action is smartly simplified into a lever action. The Snowman's helmet accessory is actually pretty well copied. Rotaro comes with a simple dagger, very similar to the daggers that he shipped with. The head connection for the Snowman is actually very weird. You can see they used a lot of plastic here, but for whatever reason decided not to make a functional joint. The way that they opened the original toy to create the molds was pretty similar to how any customizer would do it. You enter the figure from the base using a screwdriver and then kind of pop the figure apart. They copied all of the pin connections very accurately. The torso snaps together very well, but you can see they never repaired the part where they popped the waist apart. So you're left with a very accurate copy of the torso, but then one that mechanically doesn't work that well once you put the figure back together. You can see the arms are also taken directly from the original Monkeyan figure. Very poorly done. You can see the fingers are just kind of melting all together with webbing in between. The leg molds actually look almost like stoneware. It's just so crudely cast. Very, very thick mold lines on these. Overall, just a really kind of haphazard bootleg. Taking a look at our final villain, we have Jackal Man. You can see they just took an LJN head and slapped it right on a Masters of the Universe body. The legs have been fused into the hips. We have the same kind of waist joint that we saw in Panthro and Mumm-Ra. We have the classic Masters of the Universe hands with the open palm and thumbs up. They sculpted some back hair on this, a little bit over the shoulders, slapped some paint on it and called it Jackal Man. A relatively effortless and awful bootleg. And last but not least, I pulled my 2 best examples of Lion-O bootlegs. As far as the standard series bootlegs go, these are the epitome of what you're going to see. Again, like Cheetara, we have a character in a bag with a blister stapled to the top. You can see all the details were copied relatively faithfully, but just the mold lines on this thing were absolutely awful. You can see where they tried to fill in the battery pack holes in Battlematic action. This figure comes with pretty decent accessories. Usually the swords have very melted tips. Really just a sloppy bootleg. Final example of Lion-O that I have is actually really the worst bootleg that I've ever found, other than a few Silverhawks. I'm not really sure if I should be scared that they have children making toys or if someone just really should have never started this project. Overall, really just an awful bootleg. Kind of looks like it's made out of chewing gum or poop. I've always been afraid that it's just going to melt whenever I have it on display. Do I even need to comment on the inaccuracies here? I think you get the gist. Thanks for hanging around for Mexican knockoffs, and as always, stay tuned for more Black Tub Bootlegs.